Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today, I'm going to go through Universal Analytics, how and why to switch. My name is Becky Vardaman. I'm VP of Strategy here at Converge Consulting. Any of you, I noticed some names on the list there that are a little bit familiar. Anybody who's heard me speak before knows that I am fired up about analytics and universal analytics, and trying to get people to switch is one of the things that I feel really passionate about. I think that getting out in front of it is going to save you so much trouble in the long run. And really, I think 2015 is the year that you really need to make this a priority. Converge Consulting, a little bit about us. We're a higher education inbound marketing firm. And what that means is we spend a lot of our time focusing in on content strategy, SEO, digital advertising, obviously web analytics, video storytelling, website redesigns. We do a ton of digital work with universities and colleges all over the world. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before I jump into the actual content. I will take questions at the end. I've hopefully left enough time in this webinar to take some questions, and I will absolutely stay on a little bit longer because I know that this is a really hot topic and that people have a lot of questions about it. Additionally, I am recording the webinar right now, and we're going to work to get this live for you on our website, and you will get an email out there as soon as it is available for you to watch back. If you have questions or if you have a colleague that needs to see it, or if you have to jump off for some important meeting or something. So looking forward to talking a little bit more question-wise at the end. You can just pop those into the chat. So why are we here? Today I want to talk to you guys about that transition to universal analytics. And really, it starts with these 4 different main points. I want to talk a little bit about the history of Google Analytics and web analytics on the whole, and really talk about how we got to where we are now and what the context is. Then we have the transition, why we need to transition to universal analytics. Hopefully, when we get through this webinar, you will believe me that it is important that you make this transition. Additionally, you're going to ask the next question, how do I actually make that transition? So I'll give you some pointers. I've gone through this transition with dozens of schools at this point, and have learned some things that work really well and some things that maybe we can do better in the next time around. So I'll give you some of those tips and tricks from actually doing the work. And then finally, I find this to be a really great time to go ahead and implement a strategic analytics plan. A lot of us have analytics on our site, and they've probably been there since 2005, and we've been collecting all this information. But the problem is we don't know if that information is correct, and we aren't doing anything with that information. So I'm going to give you some pointers and some tips on how you can actually go through the process, make this upgrade, and end up using your data to make really good decisions about your marketing. So let's start with a little bit of history. Excuse me. So back in 2005, this is actually pulled out of an infographic we just posted on our website. So if you want to see the full infographic, you can go to convergeconsulting.org. But back in 2005, there was this company called Urchin. Some of you might be familiar with Urchin. I know I am. When I first started working right out of college, I worked for a company that had Urchin software on their website. And that's when I started really working in analytics in 2005. So this company called Urchin is doing a great job of putting out some analytics, and Google sees them and says, this is a thing that we want to offer to people. So they acquired Urchin, and they started to roll out Google Analytics. They renamed it. The thing is, it was so popular that you had to be on a waiting list that was months long to be able to get this, because their servers couldn't handle all of the data and all of the information that was being requested of them. So clearly this was something that the market was looking for and the market was in a good need for. By 2006, they got to the point that, yes, everybody who wanted to have analytics, they could support. So it's free for everybody. Anybody could get on it. And Google really started by 2006, August of that year, being able to support people across the board. It became a lot more commonplace. So things rocked and rolled for a little while there. And all this time, Google is adding new reports, changing things around, trying to keep up with the way people are using the internet. By 2009, they decided that they wanted to put out a different type of code that wouldn't slow down your website and would give you more accurate tracking. So if anybody remembers traditional analytics, it used to have to go in the footer of your website. You put that little snippet of code way down in the footer. And the reason behind that is because as it was loading on your site, it could sometimes slow down some of the actual page content. And you didn't want to have a bad user experience, so you would drop that all the way to the bottom of the page. The problem is, if your analytics code is on the bottom of the page and there's some kind of loading error before that, you would never know because the analytics code didn't load. So to fix that problem, Google introduced asynchronous tracking code. And this code can go in the header. And the reason it can do that is because it can load at the same time asynchronously with the rest of your page, and it won't impact it. So great news, now we can do a lot better job of troubleshooting if a page isn't loading in the first place, which is one of a really great reason to look at your analytics. So asynchronous has been, since about 2009, the standard, and I would say probably 80% of the schools that I work with are on asynchronous right now. And we're obviously moving them to universal. Every now and then I run across somebody who's still on the traditional code. Or maybe they have asynchronous, but it's placed in the footer. So 2009, asynchronous came along. It was a huge breakthrough and has been, really, it's the last major code change since and until Universal Analytics this year. So as I mentioned, Google has constantly, through the years, been trying to put out lots of different reports to meet the needs of their marketers. So in 2011, it released real-time analytics, which is actually run off a totally different engine. And it lets you see people that are on your website in real time. This is a really cool tool. I usually don't use this for a lot of analysis. I use it for a ton of testing. Like when I'm putting in event tracking, I'll go out and I'll check it in real-time analytics. And if you're doing some kind of right now type of marketing campaign, perhaps in social media or an email campaign, and you want to see how it's doing initially, you can go in real time and you can check that out. So 2011, another big event there, real time. In 2012, something called Google Tag Manager launched. I'm going to explain this a whole lot better in a couple of slides, but Google Tag Manager is not necessarily a part of Google Analytics, but it's another Google tool that helps you organize your analytics and makes your analytics do a lot more work for you. So not only can you use Google Tag Manager for analytics, but you can use it for advertising tags, things like conversion tracking or remarketing code, or other tags that you might have. I've seen people use it for things like Crazy Egg or like a lot of other different types of snippets of code that you need to place on your website in order to get third-party applications to work correctly. So 2012, Google Tag Manager came out and really helped people from an enterprise level make sense of all of the different types of tags that you can use. And 2014 is when we first saw Universal out in public beta. So the year before, in November, Universal Analytics hit private beta, which meant only the nerds got to play with it, right? The people who were really in tight with Google and got a chance to play with the different tools and flex it and see what was working and what wasn't working. By April of the next year, it was in public beta, which meant anybody could put it on their site. Now, Google Analytics Universal is out of beta, and we should all be using it. Google, some of you have probably seen in your analytics when you log in, under the settings, there's a little note that's encouraging you to upgrade. Usually that's one of the first things that I'll have someone call me and say, what is this? Should I do this? Because Google isn't trying to encourage you to upgrade. They're doing this because their new tool is specifically designed for the most modern user experience out there. So you notice all these little icons around it. We're talking about your mobile phones and shopping and different devices and home and work and social networks and even video gaming systems, anything that's out there. Up until this point, if I were to go out and visit Amazon from my smartphone on the way home, my husband drives, don't worry. But if I'm shopping on the way home in the passenger seat from Amazon on my phone and I purchase something, and then I get home on the couch and I pull out my laptop and I purchase something else, up until Universal Analytics, we would have no way to understand that I was the same user between my phone and my laptop. So that's one of the biggest things that Universal Analytics is going to do for you. So now is the time to move. So let me explain a little bit more about why you should transition and what Universal Analytics actually is. So Universal Analytics has a whole bunch of new features. You can see just visually the layout here, that left or center left column with all the check marks. There's a lot more things that Universal Analytics is going to offer. It has all of the same things. There's, see the coming soons there and the upgrades. Those are all check marks by now. This is a little bit old information because Google hasn't updated this. But you're going to end up with things like offline online data sync, multi-platform tracking, the thing I just explained. You can simplify your configuration controls, and there's going to be new features all released here. You can't even, this is actually the screen that Google used to give you when you created a new property, when Classic Analytics was still an option. If you create a new property now, you don't even get the option. You're only going to be able to create a Universal Analytics property. So that's another indicator of how much Google wants you to move. So let's talk about some of these different elements of what makes Google Analytics Universal so much better. We have the measurement protocol. The measurement protocol is really what is driving the changes and making a lot of these cool things possible. So it's really allowing you to send data to Google from any other system and device sent through this UTM GIF image request, which means basically you can send data in from, if you have a call center, a point of sale. So like if you have a recruitment office that's actually calling students, they can send in information saying, yes, I talked to them this day. We converted on XYZ goal where they signed up to come for a campus visit. And we can actually put that into your analytics system from that call center, which is crazy. Something you've never been able to do before. Or we have point of sale systems. So let's imagine that you wanted to use this on campus and you wanted to keep track of what people were purchasing at the gift shop or how many different books they got at the bookstore. You could actually keep track of all of those things through Google Analytics and tie that over into how those people are also using your website, which is crazy. Offline conversion import, I just mentioned that you can actually send in conversions. So like from that call center, if I got someone to sign up for an event or donate money over the phone, we could tie that person through by using that measurement protocol and see, yes, that person came to our website 5 times. They filled out 2 of our forms. They finally, yes, said we'd like to donate money to the university on the phone. Server-side sessionization is, yes, that's a word, is really just telling us that from a technical standpoint, it's a lot easier for us to make some adjustments and customize our tracking iteration. So some of these things like adding new organic search engines, which basically means if you have something on your website that you think is actually organic search, you can count it as organic search from a source perspective. You can change your tracking cookie timeout length. So they're set to 30 minutes. If you think it should actually be an hour for the experience that people are having on your site, you can change it there. And reclassifying certain keywords as direct, which basically means if somebody looks for Google searches Becky Vardaman and ends up on beckyvardaman.com, they probably are really just trying to go to beckyvardaman.com because they're using Chrome and our URL bar is actually also a search bar. So it allows us to kind of clean things up a little bit. None of those things are probably a huge deal to you. But what this means, server-side sessionization on the whole, it means that we have access to things that we, as marketers, that we used to have IT people go in and change in the code of our implementation. And now it's right there within the console. So it's a positive thing going forward, I think, because it's a sign of things to come that Google is saying, we're trying to make this easier. We're trying to put the marketer first. We're trying to make it so that you can have more accurate, more customized data without having to deal with learning to code, basically. So I think that's the biggest takeaway. Custom dimensions and custom metrics are really similar to custom variables, if anybody used those previously. But again, a little bit less coding because of that server-side sessionization we just talked about. This is an example from Justin Catroni's blog down here, where he's not only he's got some custom variables that he's set up on different blog posts so that he can group his blog posts separately between seeing how many people just by the year are looking at it or just by a specific post type. I could see this in a higher ed perspective being used for different program pages or department pages where you want to put together some of those custom metrics so you can get some really good, interesting information just based on some things that maybe aren't available just by the URL or the page title or something that you could immediately find. Different ways to group. Another piece of this that's really cool and I think has some great implications in higher ed is dimension widening. I'm actually working right now with a school to take, we're using this number over here. It's not an ISBN number, this is an example, but we're using an ID number out of a CRM. And we're using something called the user ID field in Universal Analytics. Universal Analytics will let us import using that unidentifiable ID number from the CRM to identify people, upload those and tie that into our analytics iteration. So now we know at least an unidentifiable number that we can say this person is the same person as they were in a different session because they're coming in and they're logged in. That is amazing for cross-domain tracking, and it's great for things like an alumni network that's trying to understand their donors. And people come and log into the site and they know that all of a sudden they are this specific person. So since we know it's a specific person, you see whether it's the author name and the publication date, we're going to upload, instead of author name and publication date, we're going to add to that number that we know, the unique number from their CRM, we're going to add whether they're one of our top donors or not. So we can understand the user activity on the website of the top donors to our university. And hopefully what that turns into is analysis that says, how do we create more top donors? Are the top donors consistently coming in through email? Are they consistently coming in through our Facebook efforts? How do we get more people that are kind of on the cusp of that top donor list moved up into that top donor list? What is the really popular things? The example here that they give is with unique book IDs. So maybe that's a little bit simpler one to understand. If you have a bunch of ISBN numbers for books and you upload that up, you can also add on to it the author name and the publication date, which means you can look at information based on author's books or the publication time period within analytics. So some really cool stuff, I think, is the takeaway. Very cool stuff is going to be available and possible here with this type of analytics. Next is the cost data import. This is really great for trying to figure out your true marketing ROI. Just like you can actually import your conversions from other places into Google Analytics, this tool is going to allow us to import dollars. So we're really going to get true ROI. We used to kind of have a cutoff point where if the dollars weren't happening on the site through like integrated AdWords, we wouldn't be able to see that. So we've always had that AdWords ROI, and it's great. But now we can import it from all our other marketing activities. So whether it's emails that we're paying for, or if you're advertising on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or even Bing, you can actually go and import the dollar amounts that you're spending and turn that around with the conversion and how many conversions you're getting. So much better ROI tracking. Of course, there's the multi-platform tracking. This is one that I mentioned before to you guys. It's the whole idea of being able to understand that I'm the same person from my cell phone, from my work computer, from my home computer, and additionally, maybe if I'm at a kiosk on campus, if I've logged into something, you'll know who I am. This is something that every analytics program has struggled with. Nobody's been able to really, since we started carrying around computers in our pockets, no one's been able to track this 100% correctly. This still won't be 100% correct, but as long as you're logged in, it's going to understand that you're the same person. I think, honestly, the biggest caveat with all of this is that you have to have somebody logged in. That's something that works really well for current students, staff, even current alumni. It doesn't work as perfectly for our prospective students. So anything that you can do to figure out how to get them connected with you is going to be better from an analytics standpoint. So let me give you an example of what this might mean in the real world. So I'm a big music fan. My husband and I go to concerts a lot, and every summer we go to Lollapalooza in Chicago. It's one of our favorites. So, excuse me. So tickets go on sale pretty soon, and we're going to go out to the website and we'll buy our tickets. Each one of these tickets has a unique ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very unique. So we're all excited. We have our tickets. We end up going to the show. We watch a bunch of bands. We do a bunch of things. They scan our tickets as we enter. So they know that us specifically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we attended Lollapalooza. So while we're there, my husband sees one of his favorite bands. And so he's a huge swag guy. So we have to go and buy a poster. So when he buys the poster, they scan his ticket. Maybe it's for a 10% discount, or maybe you get a free ball cap or something if you have a ticket that can be scanned or something like that. They'll convince you to get that ticket scanned. Now they know about us, since we have those same ticket with the same user ID on it, that not only did we buy the early bird tickets and we attended the show, but we also bought a poster. And we know probably which specific poster for which band it is. So we're not just regular fans, we're kind of super fans, right? So then we leave, we had a great time, we go home. And later, one of the bands that my husband bought the poster for are touring nearby. They're going to come to our state. So they know that they can send us an email on our smartphone and say, hey, Becky and Jake, are you guys interested in attending this show? Use your Lollapalooza discount code, or rather your Lollapalooza ticket code that's on your ticket. And if you punch that in, you'll get access to early bird tickets or, discount on tickets. So what they're doing is they're learning more about us and understanding what we really want, right? So it's a benefit for us as the users because we get discounts and they get to know us and they get to offer us things that we want. And it's a benefit to them because they really get to create user loyalty. And maybe we wouldn't have gone out of our way to find that show was coming nearby us, but we totally are going to go now. And we'll probably buy another poster, let's be honest. So all that information is basically stored throughout their CRM and in analytics in a way that we can take all of that information, tie it together, and end up with a nice little package. Clearly, this is a lot more information that free analytics tool has ever been capable of telling us about our website users. So I really like the way that analytics is going with this, and I expect in the next several years, we're going to see more and more really cool things coming out of analytics and possibilities. And hopefully, as a consumer, we'll start seeing better consumer experiences as well because people will know more and more about us. All right, so how do you transition? We know that Google Analytics, the context, how it's grown over the years. We know what it is. We know that it's got great new features. We know that all of the great new products and tools are going to come to Universal Analytics and not be available in Asynchronous. So we know we've got to transition, right? We know it's the thing to do. So how do we actually get this done? First, the people that are going to be involved. Analytics typically, when done correctly, is an enterprise level thing. I know some of you are probably not excited to hear that. You can do analytics in silos, but the best information that you can get is if you really have the whole university on board and you can put one properties code on your entire website. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Excuse me, in a minute. So the people that you're going to need to get this done, a lot of times we'll start by working with somebody in marketing, but oftentimes we'll start with a person who's just a stakeholder. So whether it comes from your marketing department or whether you're an individual stakeholder from an admissions standpoint, academics, athletics, et cetera, wherever you are within the university, that's fine. The other people that are going to be involved, though, are on this list. You're going to need somebody from a technical team, most likely, who can go ahead and get the code placed correctly and help you with any troubleshooting that might be necessary. And then you're going to have to tie in any third-party applications you're using. And I don't just mean applications like people applying to your school, although that's one of them. So anywhere that you have people that are leaving your site to do something critical, whether it's apply, sign up for an event, any of those sorts of things, sign up for a campus visit, we're going to want to make sure that we have a good list of those and pull in the people who have control over those. Excuse me. And then additionally, you're going to need to, if you're a stakeholder, you need to make sure you're talking to marketing. If you're marketing, you've got to make sure you're bringing in the stakeholders. Anybody who is looking at the analytics reports, you want to make sure that they're in on the process from the beginning. I find it goes a lot more smoothly if we can tell everybody what we're doing, explain why it's a really good idea, and help people realize that they're going to have goals and dashboards and actionable data coming out of it on the other end. It's usually a pretty good selling point if we can say, hey, remember all that analytics work that maybe you did 2 years ago and nobody's looked at? We're going to make it actionable. The time involved. I've seen this happen in a couple of minutes, and I've seen it happen in more than 6 months. I have 6 months written down there. I've seen it happen in probably 16 or 17 or 18 months. So it depends on how you want to go about it. And kind of what your internal workings are. So the actual transition to do this is really quick. Our website, I can upgrade to Universal Analytics in about 5 minutes because it's literally going in and changing out the code. And bam, you are now upgraded to Universal Analytics. Congratulations. But I think that this is a really great time to go in and make sure that you are tracking all of the pages that you want to be tracking. You have all of your subdomains and domains lined up and strategically tracked. You understand where you're putting your property boundaries so that your referral information is really accurate. And really making and executing this plan so that when you're done with it, like I said, you have great information. So the strategic plan, accurate, reliable data, audience-based goals and events to support it, regular dashboard reporting, and tag management. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these things, so don't worry. So there's 2 ways you can go about upgrading to Universal. There's a straight upgrade. This means that if you currently have a asynchronous property that you're using and you have good information in it, there's 2 steps. You can take that existing property and you can upgrade it. The first one is to go into your admin page, change it, and say, yes, I would like to transfer to Universal. It's just a quick little button that is in the settings. And you can say, yep, I'm ready to do it. And then the second code, or the second piece, step 2, which is not optional, I have that in parentheses there. You actually do have to do it eventually. It's optional initially, but you do have to do it, is you have to go out and replace the code. So the code actually looks different and it acts different that you put on your site. So 2 steps. Go out to go into your analytics in the settings, say you want to upgrade. Step number 2 is upgrade the code. Normally that code can be upgraded pretty quickly because hopefully you have it in a template someplace and you'll only have to change it once and it'll change on every page of your site. So the people who want to do it this way are the people who have a really good analytics setup and you feel like you have good, clean data that's tracking things accurately in the first place. If you fall into this bucket, you can have historical data within your same property, and it's going to allow you to go back in and see data year over year, month over month, and you can compare things to the past before it was universal. So upgrading to universal just by default will make some slight changes to your information, but on the whole, if you can do this, it's good because you'll be able to have that year over year type of information all in one place. The caveat there is that I think I've probably, like I said, I've worked with dozens of schools setting this up and working through this. I think I've only been able to do this with 1 or 2. Most schools that I work with don't have an analytics property in Asynchronous that's running correctly. Most of them are set up in a way that's not optimal, and our data is not going to be accurate. So if you're in that camp, and I'll show you a couple of things you can look at in a minute to find out which camp you're in. If you're in that camp, you might want to do both. So 9 times out of 10, this is what I'll do with clients is we'll go through and we'll say, okay, you've got all this information in your asynchronous account. We're going to let it just ride there. We're going to let it stay there. That's fine. We can do both at the same time. We'll go ahead and create a brand new property that's universal, and we'll put that universal code on at the same time as the asynchronous code. That's fine. Nothing will be broken. In fact, this little snippet of text is right out of Google, and they're telling you it's okay to do. And basically what that means is from the moment that you put that code on your site, that universal code, that's when your data will start. It's really helpful though, because we can compare the same day of universal with the asynchronous and see how much it's changed between the two. And oftentimes what we do here is we'll go through and make a giant map and understand exactly where we should put the universal analytics. And we'll go through that whole process of setting up strategic analytics so that your universal account is 100% accurate, or at least as close as possible. 100% is a dangerous thing to say, right? So most people that I work with, this is the way we go. And it's just because the information you had before wasn't accurate anyway. So if somebody was going to compare it year over year and we kept it in the same property, they'd be comparing, apples and oranges, and it really wouldn't help you with any of your strategic decisions anyways. It's actually more helpful to have them in 2 different properties so somebody doesn't accidentally do that. All right. So what happens if I don't upgrade? I get this question a lot. And again, this is pulled directly from Google answering this question. So what they're saying is if you don't do step 1, if you don't go in and say, yes, I would like to upgrade, eventually you're going to be auto-transferred to universal. They haven't done that yet. I'm still seeing some people with the little question that says, do you want to upgrade? But eventually they're going to push you over. You're going to have to do it. If you don't complete step 2, which is changing out the code, if you don't upgrade your actual code, you're going to be out of luck. The data will be processed for up to 2 years, they say. After Universal Analytics has become the new operating standard, no giant flag went down and said, bam, Universal is the new operating standard. The clock hasn't necessarily, there's no running clock online that tells us how long we have exactly. But when Universal Analytics came out of beta, I'm counting that as the beginning of being the new operating standard. So you have about 1.5 years. That's why I think this year is so critical that we make sure that we're getting people switched over so that they don't end up with broken data. If you don't do it, basically, your data is not going to be processed. They're basically depreciating all of that, and it's not going to work anymore. So this slide might be the slide that you want to print out and hand to whomever is helping you prioritize some of your tasks. This is straight from Google saying we got to make sure that we're getting people moved over, and we're not guaranteeing that we're going to be able to process your data after these 2 years are up. So I think that you're safe as long as you flag it to be done this year. Scary, right? So keep in mind though, yes, they're going to pull the plug eventually on asynchronous, but at the same time, they're giving you a bunch of really cool stuff. So it's kind of a handoff. That's the way I think of it anyways. So let's talk a little bit about strategic analytics and what that process should look like. We know our context, where we came from. We know what universal is. We know how to switch. Let's talk about making that switch as smart as possible. So many of you know this. All of you know this, let's be honest. In a perfect world, analytics is you take this little snippet of code, you put it on your site, you're done. You just set up your analytics, right? Hooray! It's really easy. It's intended to be simple. The problem is, and that works if you have a website like Converge Consulting's, where we have basically one subdomain and pages that are all kind of contained. Higher education isn't like that. It's a little bit of a big hairy beast. We have subdomains and third-party sites and microsites and landing pages hosted by agencies and things that are broken and retired and things that no one's looked at for 10 years. We have the oldest sites in the world. Higher education is where, it's where the internet was born. We have sites that are huge, authoritative, old, and kind of complicated and hard to track. That's the honest truth of it. So how do we actually set up something that makes sense, that's smart, that's going to be accurate as we're making that universal transition? Three major things that I want to talk about here: setup and data quality, measuring your goals, or having measurable goals rather, that you can actually make good decisions off of, and having that regular dashboard reporting so that you can make those decisions on a regular basis. So our setup and data quality. Let's talk about current setup, assessment, subdomains and domains, and Google Tag Manager. So many of you are familiar with this diagram. Anyone who's not, this is how Google Analytics is organized. You have one big account, that big blue box. You have a property, which is the thick green line. And then underneath the property, you have views, which used to be called profiles. The most important line on this chart is the property line, the big, thick green one. I mentioned earlier that really what you want to do is think about this from an enterprise level and try to get as many people on board as possible to have the same property code in your university on their website. The reason that you want to do it this way is because it's really all about referral data. I like to envision like a campus. If I'm coming to campus and I want to understand how people are getting to my university, whether they're walking, whether they're taking a bicycle, whether they are taking the bus, whether they're driving, etc., because I need to figure out if I need more bike racks or parking, etc. So I don't really care if somebody comes in and goes to the biology building. If they drive in, they go to the biology building, and then they walk over to the chemistry building. What I care about is the fact that they drove in and they need some place to park their car, right? If you're tracking each different subdomain or section of your website as its own building on campus with its own green line surrounding it, all you're going to see is that somebody came from your athletic site and that they came over to your undergraduate admissions site, and then maybe you'll see a referral from your undergraduate admissions site to your biology department site. It's much, much more helpful to know that that person came from Facebook to your athletic site, to your undergraduate site, back over to your bio site or whatever it might be. Because what are you spending money on? Facebook. You're spending time and money on Facebook advertising. That also might be organic. You could sub out Facebook for AdWords traffic. Anything that you're spending time and money on, that's what you want the referral information for. You don't care if you're getting referrals from other properties within your same university. There are some instances where I'll make recommendations where we set up some kind of complicated tracking so people can see it from different directions. But 9 times out of 10, my recommendation is to take that green line and kick it out as far as possible on your university so you understand how people are really getting to you in the first place. So you can see how that might be a university-wide effort. When we're talking about setup and data quality, I'd say this is probably one of the most common things that I say is not accurate and that we should probably change as we're moving to universal analytics. So how do we even go about doing that? I use a document like this. It's just a simple spreadsheet where I go through and make a giant list of all of our domains and subdomains. Typically, domains and subdomains, well, not always, but typically they are the places where we have those artificial green lines drawn that we need to kick out. Every now and then I'll run into somebody who has it on a directory where they're only tracking part of the directory, but this typically is a good place to start. There's a couple of different places you can get a big list of these. Your IT might have them. I pull them from an analytics report that I can share if you want to shoot me a note. It's a custom report. Or I often use the Moz report. If anyone's familiar with Moz SEO, it's M-O-Z, Moz. It's an SEO tool that you can do a crawl of your site, and it'll kick out a bunch of URLs for you, so you can kind of mine that to find all the URLs. So once we have a list of these things, we want to figure out, is it currently being tracked? And if so, what's the property ID? Are we using it? If so, what for? You'd be amazed at how often we find out that things aren't being used at all. Do we want to include it? So that the column there that says include or separate or 301, that's going to be your map. We're going to include almost everything. There might be some instances where we say that'll be a separate property, and that's okay. We want referral traffic from it. And sometimes we just say, let's just retire this. And instead of having it, let's have it 301 redirect to a different page. So from an analytics perspective, that'll fix the problem. So once we have this big list, we have a list of all the places we want to include, and we're in really good shape. This is your map that you can turn around and execute with. Yours doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this is what I found that works really well. Another thing in data quality that'll give you a really quick understanding if you have a problem going on with your existing analytics and which category you fall into, whether you're the person that can just upgrade or whether you're the person that needs to actually go ahead and do both at the same time, is go look at your self-referrals. See if you have any self-referrals. Basically what this means is that Google Analytics thinks that traffic is coming from your site to your site, which of course isn't true. It just means that there's an error. It means that something's not working along the way. So how can you find this? Go look under acquisition. And in fact, they changed this morning, or maybe yesterday, the way that this lays out. But it's underneath acquisition, and then it will be under an arrow that says all traffic now, and then it'll say all referrals. They nested it on me. Oh, Google, I mentioned they're always updating things to make them better, right? I think they're updating them to make my slides out of date. So if you check your all referrals there, what you don't want to see is your own domain as a referral source. That's bad. Basically, this is a dummy account of ours. I promise ours is fixed. But basically what this report is saying, that 213 visits, we don't know where they came from. They might have come from an ad that we placed someplace. They might have come from Facebook. They might have come from LinkedIn or from search or from any other place, but we don't know because our analytics is overriding it with this information that says it's coming from our own website. The top two things that I see that cause this in higher education is tracking missing or not working on a landing page. So imagine if I go land on a page of your site and I land on page number 1 and that page has tracking code on it. I go to page number 2 that does not have tracking code on it. Google just thinks I left the website, correct? So now I'm on this page that has no tracking code on it, not talking to Google at all, and then I click on another page, maybe just in the navigation, and I go back to another page that has the tracking code on it. To Google, this looks like a brand new session. I look like I've just entered the website for the first time, and Google by default is always going to look and see, well, where did they come from? And they see, oh, it was a referral from another website, and that other website has convergeconsulting.org or whatever your main domain might be. So that's a very common way that happens. Another common way that happens is if you are tracking across a lot of subdomains or multiple domains and you haven't fixed this inconsistent tracking code configuration, you haven't done that little edit to the code that says, hey, I'm in asynchronous and I need to make this change so I can track across different subdomains. Universal Analytics is going to fix that one automatically for us. So I'm not worried about the inconsistent tracking code typically. What we're most worried about is making sure we get all of the pages of your site with tracking code on them. Usually that'll get fixed as we make the transition to Universal though. Not usually, always. We fix it as we're going. I mean, that's the point. All right. So let me talk a little bit about Google Tag Manager. As you're going through this implementation and you're trying to figure out how to upgrade to Universal, something that's going to save you a lot of grief later is if you think about using Google Tag Manager for your implementation. Google Tag Manager, this little Mario guy on here is, because I like to think of it kind of like a warp. It's sort of like that magic green pipe right? That sends me from one world directly into the next world. I'm showing my age. Grew up playing this. But basically, you have an interface with your computer that's in your browser that you can deal directly onto the code of the site through. So this is going to give your IT people a break. They're only going to have to place the container code on your site one time. And then you're going to be able, as a marketer, to make edits and change things from just that interface on the web. Makes it a lot easier for you from an IT perspective. It also makes it a lot easier for you from just an organization standpoint. So the way Google Tag Manager works, it uses tags, quote unquote, which is just snippets of code, a little snippet of code to listen, capture, and collect information that's going on your website. So basically what you do is you create you create an account and a container within Google Tag Manager, and you'll get this container code. You place this container code one time on your website right after the opening body, similar to how you would with the analytics code, but you don't have to place the analytics code anymore. And then basically through this interface that you're seeing right here in front of you, you can place your base analytics code and any other types of tags that you might want directly onto your website. This is really good from an enterprise standpoint because if there are people all over the institution doing AdWords advertising, or they're trying to get conversion tracking on, those sorts of things, they can all be managed through this one thing. And it's really easy for the marketers to go ahead and do that without having to bother an IT department. Plus, once the campaigns are over, they're all here in one place. You don't have to go back through all of the different pages and remove the code. So it's a lot cleaner too. The other things that you're seeing here, though, are more analytics related. So I won't go into this too much in depth because it gets pretty complicated, but there are some really, really cool dynamic tracking things you can do through Google Tag Manager called auto event tagging. Through auto event tagging, you can basically set up Google Universal Analytics events on things like your navigation, on video plays. You can record every time somebody clicks on a certain banner ad on your homepage, anytime somebody clicks on an email address, anytime somebody clicks on an outbound link. A lot of these things we can by default dynamically track through Tag Manager, which is going to make your life a lot easier. So if you're going through this process and you're going to put the time in and you're going to figure out where are we putting all of the pieces correctly, make sure that we have the code in all the right places, make sure that we have all of the right information being collected, I really recommend taking a look at Tag Manager. And I expect that we'll do a follow-up webinar sometime in the next 6 months or so just on Tag Manager. There's so much to look at and so much to learn there. So don't be worried if you are a little bit overwhelmed by just Tag Manager. I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood it was there and that it's a great option and it's something that you should consider as you're going through this process, okay? I love Tag Manager, can you tell? In addition to having all of that put in place, you want to make so we know that we have the right information getting recorded, we know it's accurate. Once all that accurate information is coming in, I want you to consider making really measurable goals. So on your website, start out by talking about who are your audiences. Higher education has lots of different audiences. We might have high school students trying to decide if they're going to come to school. We might have young alumni that we want to come and encourage to attend an event. We might have somebody who's had a life change and is thinking about coming back to school. All of those people have different sets of goals. So think about all your audiences first. And sometimes this will be broken down, especially from the institution level. You're going to have to break it down into different audiences. And after that, for each one of those audiences, think about why we have a website. Do we want them to donate? Do we want them to apply, visit, or request info? Do we want them to actually fill out the application? Do we want them to attend an event? There's all sorts of different things that we might want them to do. So to organize this, believe it or not, I've got a spreadsheet of a huge analytics framework. So we think about each specific audience. So let's take the example of the high school student that we want to apply. So for our high school student, our business objective is we want them to apply. We want them to attend our school, right? Our website goal, that means what do we want them to do on the website that we're going to count as a goal? So we want them to actually fill out the application, right? So our website goal is filling out that application. The key performance indicator is taking it one level more granular. How will we know that they filled out that application? So the easiest way to do that is, let's say they go fill out the application and they hit a thank you page after they're done. We'll track the number of page views to that thank you page, and that will be our indicator. I also like to have people think about targets. So that's kind of your goal for your goal. We know that we're getting 30 applications a week. We want to try to get to 50 in order to help support the goals of the institution. And then think about segments. Google Analytics does a great job of helping you understand your users a little bit better and say, maybe we're really interested not just in the number of people who are doing this thing, but additionally, where are they from in the country? Or have they been to our website before? Or which traffic source drove them to actually come and apply? Was it our Facebook ads? Was it Google organic? How did they get here? So thinking about those segments and understanding strategically for each specific goal, which ones are going to be most important. And this is a process, again, I put it in a big spreadsheet and we walk through each audience and each goal, just like this. Then we translate it to the website. There's 4 different types of goals you can set up. There's the destination goal, which is, like I mentioned, the thank you page. You can do time on site, which is exactly what it sounds like. Number of seconds somebody spends on a site. If they spend so many seconds, we're going to count it as a goal conversion. Pages per visit, which is similar. If they hit that many pages, we're going to count it as a goal conversion. Those 2 are really good for like blog sites or content sites, news sites. And then there's also events. I mentioned events just briefly earlier, saying that Google Tag Manager can create auto event tracking on your site. Events are basically little tracking that you put on different elements of your site that we can also use as a goal. So maybe you want to know how many times somebody played a video, or how many times somebody clicked back and forth on this slider, or how many times somebody clicked on a specific apply now, or maybe an offsite link to Twitter. We can event track all of those things with a little snippet of code that looks like this, or again, through Google Tag Manager. And you can set up goals around that. So if you're going through this exercise and you're saying, oh, I don't know how I'm going to make this a key performance indicator, there's usually a way to do it with an event. Great. The reason goals are so great is because if you're looking at this information, okay, well, we had 2,000 page views last month with 70% of them were returning visitors and 80% bounce rate. So is that good or bad? Really, as marketers, and we're looking at the bottom line. So if we set up our goals to align with our bottom line, number of people who have applied, number of dollars donated, page views matter, but we're going to see what we really are looking for is quality page views that turn into the thing that we want people to do. So it's all about not just looking at fluff metrics, which, yes, these things matter. Of course, increasing your page views over time is a positive thing, unless you're increasing your page views because you keep posting pictures and videos of kittens doing funny things and people are coming to look at them, but they're never doing any of the things you want them to do on your site. So it really helps put some context around those metrics and helps you benchmark better. All right, just a couple more slides and then we'll take some questions. Regular reporting, dashboards. These are great. Top left of your reporting, you have a little area there where you can create dashboards for yourself and you can customize these. They are also downloadable from the internet and you can customize them. It's basically you get to pick your 12 favorite reports and they're easy for you to go and look at anytime that you want. They're really great because you can export them as a PDF to share with somebody. You can set up an email so that somebody gets them on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And you can also share them with the links there before. So you can share the link to it or you can share the actual dashboard itself. This makes these really, really positive for being able to yes, we have our goals set up. Yes, we have all this strategy in place, but let's make sure it's front of mind because we all know how that gets. If you don't have something constantly kind of, right in front of your face, you aren't always going to make those decisions with it. Where do you start? Always make a goal dashboard. Any current reporting you're doing, anybody who's out there pulling reports for things and sending them to people, make sure you replace that with a dashboard so that you don't have to spend that man time doing that. Content section or content heavy sections, so like blog, news, those types of things, you can easily see the top stories and understand how to create better content that will continue to drive page views. I also like to send those to my content contributors, so the people who are actually writing the blogs and the news, if there's any PR folks out there, or if you have student bloggers, we're seeing that a lot more and more. If you have a specific marketing campaign going on where you've put together a campaign that has some ads on Facebook and some email campaign and then also some additional AdWords advertising, we can tag those things with campaign tagging all the same and give you a great dashboard to look at that. Specific traffic sources, so if you want to know how you're doing on social media, cost per click, pay per click, referrals from different websites, that's a great dashboard to look at. And we like to look at the inbound marketing process as well. So attract, how do people get to your site? A bunch of information about that. Convert, how are they doing on your goals? And delight, how are they doing it from an engagement standpoint? So just some places to start. So I went through a lot. Let me do a really quick takeaway. Universal analytics, it's time. You're not going to have the promise of your data being processed anymore after about probably 1.5 years. So you really do need to think about how you're going to get on board. And you really do probably need to think about it relatively soon. It's exciting. I can't overemphasize this. There's just so many cool things that are coming, and only Universal is going to get the new cool things. We're going to be able to do things with analytics in the next couple of years that people have been asking for forever. And there's just really, really great opportunities. I think this is going to be a differentiator in people who are using data to make decisions versus people who aren't, and the difference is going to be really substantial. So not only is it time and you kind of have to, but it is really cool. There's really cool stuff. And also it's an opportunity. This is a chance for you to make this a priority at your school, make analytics a priority just across the board, and try to create that culture of making decisions based on data instead of just on history and hunches, so that you can be really modern with your decision making. So yes, of course you should switch. It's not if, but when, and now is the time to start making that plan. All right, I'm going to jump into questions in just a second. We've got a couple more upcoming webinars. Next week, I believe, no, 2 weeks, Barbara Coward is going to do business school storytelling for the 21st century. She actually just presented that at a conference. It's great. It's a great presentation. You guys should go sign up for that on our website. Ann Olson, our founder, and I are going to do February 19th, a webinar on the inbound website checklist and help you kind of understand what are the pieces that need to fall in and are really required to have your website be that hub for all of your marketing and really work for you. And then finally in March, Haley and Ryan are going to go through and talk about digital advertising for higher education from a really programmatic standpoint. We do tons of work on this, and they've got some really great tricks and ideas there and strategies. So please do sign up for those. We have just announced that we're going to do Converge 2015. Anybody who was at Converge 2014 last year in Nashville, we had a great time, great speakers. It was a fantastic event. We encourage you all to learn a little bit more about 2015. We have a date. It'll be October, and we're doing it in New Orleans this year. Such a fun city. I actually personally got to go check out the hotel. It's really cool. You'll love it. So you can go sign up for updates right now. I'll tell you as speakers are announced and as registration becomes available. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for your time today. And I'm going to jump in and try to grab some of these questions that have been coming in. If you have some additional questions, feel free to pop them in and I will try to get to them. In Universal Analytics, can you exclude subdomains in the referral exclusion list? Yes, you can do that. Universal Analytics is that's a newer feature that you can actually go in and look at your different referrals and make sure that they're excluded out. So that is one of the things you can do to address the self-referral issue. That's a great question. Yep. Other questions? I know I gave you a lot of information there. Typical Becky. Excellent. Well, if there aren't any other questions, like I said, we've recorded this. It will go live later this week. We'll shoot you an email about it. And I have my email and my Twitter account right here. So if you think of something or if you've got a question that's rather complex and you want to shoot it to me,